Is that all right there? Okay. So I don't recognize almost anyone here, which is funny. So you guys all know I work at Basecamp, and I don't know where you guys work. Do you think we could just go around real quick, just name where you work, just so I know who's in the room here? You want to start?
Yeah, electric.
Nice. What's your name?
Matthew.
Matthew.
Ryan, I believe that you first about
Nice.
Matt Color, product designer, conversion.
My name is Andy Knight, and I also work at Conversion for Life Church.
Nice. I know your name. I don't think we've met, but I know who you are.
Shane from Vigo.
From where?
Vigo.
Okay, gotcha.
We go with Chris. We go with Marsh.
We go with Matthew.
We go with Joseph.
And Phase 2, Joe.
Phase 2. Okay. Does Sean still work there? Shane still work there? Yeah. Nice. Can we go back forward, I guess?
Matthew, yeah, I work for Cody's last stream, Texas.
Nice.
I'm Kern. I work for American Fidelity.
Cool.
Tyler, also from American Fidelity.
Logan loves drop stops. Patrick loves.
John loves.
Nice.
Nate, Phase 2.
That's Phase 2.
Phase 2.
Jared, Phase 2.
Daniel, please.
Cool.
Loves. Billy.
I didn't know you were at Lowe's now. Cool.
Sam DeRigger, Sonic.
I haven't seen you in a long time.
I know.
Yeah. I didn't recognize you with the beard.
Exactly.
I'm Brad Ulrich, Sonic Drive.
Nice.
David McGill, Sonic. Walter, Sonic.
Okay, so you guys come in teams. I like that. Because that's what I'm going to talk about here today. So I'm the lead designer at Basecamp for our iOS team, so I'm not the technical person. I'm not an iOS developer really. I mean, I get in and do some things, and I chip in where I need to. But mostly I do design. Mostly I do product development and just kind of steering the ship on the app. So. I will not be able to answer super technical questions, but I'll tell you a lot about the philosophy behind how we work on Basecamp and why we do the things we do and some of the decisions we've made. So just a little recap. I've been at 37 Signals, which became Basecamp in 2014, and I've been working on mobile. I basically worked on all of our mobile stuff. So starting with the mobile version of Basecamp Classic back in 2011. I even worked on the first version of Basecamp for Android, which I don't like to spread around, but that was before we had a dedicated Android team. So now we have a team of 3 that does Android exclusively, and I don't work on Android at all anymore. So I guess that's a way of saying that if you use Basecamp on mobile and you don't like it, it's my fault. Does anybody use Basecamp at work here? No one. Sometimes? Yeah.
I used it for personal projects, all right?
Okay.
Side projects.
Yeah. Okay, so.
We used it at Sonic till about 2 years ago.
Nice. You guys are killing me. That's right. So everybody uses Slack, right? Slack, yeah.
We didn't use Jira.
Jira, oof. I think we did that at Pubco, right? Was that what we were using?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay, well, that's fine. So this is the rest of my team. And I put their Twitter handles on there if you guys want to get a hold of them. If you do want to ask the technical questions, these are the people to ask. Well, not Tara, because she's a designer too. Just a little bit about this team. Tara came over, she's the newest member of the team. She's the other designer on the team, came over from Twitter. Dylan came over from, as I recall now, a stealth startup that we weren't allowed to talk about, and now I don't remember what it was. And Zach, if you have been in the 37 Signals ecosystem before and you were a Campfire user, you may remember an app called Flint that was a native Mac and iOS client for Campfire, and he came over having done that previously. So it's the 4 of us that are responsible for all of Basecamp on iOS, iPhone and iPad. Just a little bit about, just to brag on our team a little bit. We're doing a lot of work. We're shipping a lot of releases. We have a lot of users, and kind of proud of, where we're at for a team of 4. And so now kind of the dirty secret, that may not be a secret, is Basecamp's native web hybrid. And, sometimes we get flack for that. Sometimes that's really unpopular in a group like this. So I'm going to try and tell you a little bit about why we made the decision to go hybrid, what we get from it, and actually some of the things we've developed, how we do it. So the main reason is because it matches the values of our team and our company. So I'm going to go through each of these at once, but hopefully they just make sense on their own. So the main thing is we don't want to repeat work, and we've all sort of seen what happens when you support multiple platforms, all in native development. You end up developing a feature on several platforms all at once. And that's great, and that probably gives you the most, fidelity and the most, kind of true to a platform. But it takes a lot of people, and it takes a lot of work, it takes coordination, and all of those things are kind of things we don't want to do at Basecamp. So most of the development for Basecamp is on the web. 37 Signals, Basecamp, we're a web company, we're web developers, we're web framework makers, open source stuff like, Ruby on Rails and Stimulus, which is brand new. So our core competency is web. And, obviously they're with, on Mac and Windows, we use Electron to sort of wrap the web views. On iOS and Android, we have custom apps that we use to wrap web views essentially. One of the other things when it comes to not repeating work is we share work. So the iOS team, we work very closely with Android. And we try, even amongst the 2 mobile teams, to not work on a feature at the same time. So a lot of times we'll undertake something, we'll do the design, we'll do the API work, we'll figure out the user flow and ship it. And then Android could come along and kind of piggyback off of what we've done. A lot of times the user patterns are not going to be all that different. The implementation, the iconography might be different. There'll be some platform specific stuff, but for the most part, they get it a lot cheaper because we did the work first. They don't have to go in and write API stuff. So we flip back and forth between the 2 teams doing that very often. And we're very independent of the web team, so we don't have to ship features the same day they do. And I should have said at the beginning, like, if you guys have questions, you can stop me. This is a lot more fun if I'm just not droning for the whole time. So please do stop if I say anything that's weird or doesn't make sense. So here's just an example of looking at a feature that appears on both iOS and Android, and just you can see how they were inspired by each other. I don't remember which one came first. I actually think the Android one might have. And so we've got a similar working feature. We have slightly different things here. Language that fits the platform. Browse versus library, things like that. And so I think this is a you click to attach something to a chat or something, and you get this interface. So the other thing is, and I touched on this already, is we don't want to coordinate releases. This started because it used to be so painful on iOS. It would be weeks to wait for a new build to be approved and released and get out to users, and holding up the whole team, holding up the web team, holding up Android, having everybody coordinate and try and ship their stuff on the same day was nearly impossible, and it just is no fun. So it's a core value of Basecamp that we really don't want any team to have to coordinate with another team. So that means things like we don't wait for the web team to write an API for us. We go ahead and get it done ourselves. Desktop can ship a new feature, and Android and iOS don't have to ship it right away. And part of that's because we use web views. So almost everything that they can ship will just work in the app. Our web view controllers are made so that everything they make is just supported. And then what we can do is we can go in and sort of level those up if we want to do a native implementation or we want to kind of enhance it with some native features. But we do that on our own time scale. And as the iOS and Android teams, we plan those things independently, both of each other and of the web app.
I got a question on that.
Yeah.
So how do you, I know you guys always have philosophies behind things, right? So
Uh-huh.
how does that, and you don't have to necessarily sell that philosophy up because
Sure.
it's a smaller team. But if you're looking at it from where you're at and then kind of trying to put it into another context, what are some of the things that we can start talking about to get that mindset in place? Because for us, it's like if we say that at Sonic, it's, you can't do that.
Which part of it that?
The features have to be aligned at the same time. The
Oh, okay.
decoupling
Yeah,
of
yeah.
a feature could go on iOS before it hits Android. What are some of the talking points that, as you guys do it, does it come from customers? Could you unpack some of that a little bit?
Yeah, so it kind of works both directions. So there are times where we consider mobile more of an experimental platform, and we will ship something, a new feature on iOS first, and see how it works for customers. Since you guys aren't Basecamp users, I can't really give you a good example that I could just describe, but I'll show you some stuff later in the talk that I can describe with a picture. But it just, in the end, it doesn't matter. Part of it is because you can always kick out to the web browser. If there's a feature that's available that hasn't come to iOS yet, you can go out to the web browser and use it. I can't think of anything we shipped that was so critical that it mattered. Where the app was just unusable because we didn't get it on all the platforms at the same time. And sometimes and almost always what we get on the web comes to iOS and Android via the web views. And so it may not be the best version possible, but it's possible. And
Iterate on it and make it better.
right, yeah. But we've had examples where something we designed on iOS went into the web product, and then it went into the Android product, and so it's not all one directional.
Have you found that you push something out for a platform, it didn't work at all, pull it from that platform, and then don't implement it for the rest of them? Like it just didn't work the way.
I can't think of an example of that, but we definitely have. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely things we've tried that are just sort of experiments, and we went, it just didn't make a difference. The iOS users didn't appreciate it, and nobody on the other platforms. The other platforms, at their discretion, decide what they're going to implement. So if they see something that we shipped and they go, not into that, they just don't.
Those are different kinds of users, someone on Android versus.
Yeah, and the teams have different goals and philosophies and different priorities. One of the things we're always kind of playing with is native versus hybrid fidelity. Some things just feel better in native. They're faster, they're more responsive. Anything that involves input usually especially feels better native. So as a team, we're always kind of looking at where's the fidelity line, and we have different opinions on that. And Android and iOS have different strengths in those regards. So we make our own decisions. Does that make sense? Yeah. So another value is keeping our team and our company small. We don't want to be big. We don't want to have 200 designers. We don't want to have 20 iOS developers working on the iOS app. So this is the whole company. And this should probably add up to about 55, but I didn't check my math. I think the last line is the most important, though. We have no managers. There are people in leadership roles, but nobody that is just a manager where their job is just to coordinate things. Everybody's a developer, a designer. Everyone does, hands-on work. And I don't know how big these other teams are, for iOS or whatever, but I just I pulled up a few apps that sort of have a similar scope. This is a similar size product to Basecamp. And these guys have huge numbers of employees. And I don't know what they all do. I don't know how it breaks down. Maybe they're all customer support. But the main thing is 55 is a very small number of people. And we're proud of that. things change. I'm sure you guys have all been through the process of a company that starts out with like 15 people, and it's really cool and interactive, and everybody knows what's going on, and then you get to 100, and then you're like, I don't even want to work here anymore, right? So we're really cognizant of not growing the company just to grow it. I mean, when we have a need, we add someone. But we really try and make do with what we have. And so that's part of the philosophy here. And granted, we make trade-offs. We don't have a fully native app, with high-level interactions, but we have a very good app, and customers are very happy with it, as I showed earlier. Part of the problem is, and DHH counted this a while ago, Basecamp has something like 200 screens when you really start counting all the view templates. So to make that fully native, every single screen, everything high fidelity, would take a gigantic team, or an enormous amount of time, or maybe both. And we just have no desire to be that company. So you guys may not feel that way. Maybe you want to be huge. Maybe, that's a priority for you. But for us, staying small is important. So the idea is that of these 200 screens, almost all of them we get for free, basically, through web. And then we selectively sort of nativize things where it makes the most sense. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So I kind of touched on this. We played our company and platform strengths. So, just sort of the history of Basecamp as a company, built on the web, invested in the web. We believe in the web. And we've made a lot of contributions in that area. This is kind of a generic thing, but I think it's a valid point that there are certain things that each platform is better at. Web is really good at complicated document layouts, doing things with text and multiple attachments and inline media and all these kind of things. Rendering those things is, I think you would probably agree, kind of hard on iOS. Certainly harder than it is on web. And native is good for high fidelity interactions, input, media handling, access to sensors and cameras and things like that. The other thing that I think is important is sort of at the bottom of this chart, which is how you iterate on things. Web, it's super easy to just keep working on stuff, keep tweaking things, deploy. You can do it 1,000 times a day and keep updating things. It's not that easy with native, right? We use TestFly. We're sending multiple builds a day sometimes, but there's a lag time there. Building to your device kind of stinks, so we try not to do that. We also, the point here is we also have a little more firepower on the website. We just have, we have more programmers, more designers working on that side. So they're essentially part of the team. So aside from the philosophy, I just wanted to get into, how we actually put this all together and show you some things that we've developed that make things easier. A big priority is sort of empowering the web developers, like we talked about, to ship things on iOS that don't require us to ship a build. So just on the website, at its core, Basecamp's web views are responsive designs. We generally use all the same backend stuff. The JavaScript and CSS is basically the same, although we sort of supplement that, and I'll show you that in a little bit. This is sort of a diversion from what we did with Basecamp 2 in 2012, where we actually had separate CSS, JS bundles, and view templates. The thinking at that time, and I meant to put together some stats here, but I'm sure the concept we agree on it. And the difference in JavaScript and CSS and painting performance on devices has changed dramatically since 2012. And at that time, running heavy JS on mobile devices wasn't so great. And now it's become less of an issue. And as each generation of devices comes out, they get faster and faster. I think the iPhone 10 probably runs JavaScript faster than my Mac does. So talking about giving the web developers power to do things, we've developed what we call the bridge, which is a JavaScript portion of the native app that does a few things. One, we can apply attributes into the markup that will change JavaScript behaviors, will change CSS styles. Typically, we do it at on the HTML element, but there are certain runtime things that happen within a view. And so it's sort of like the philosophy is opt-in. There is the core mobile web views, and then once they're wrapped inside a native wrapper, then they can opt into additional features, or the native wrapper can sort of assert that, okay, I'm handling this portion of the behavior. So an example of that is there's an inline comment form, but you click add a comment in Basecamp in the iOS app, and we open up a native composer is what we call it. And so again, input is better, typing is better in a native view versus a web form, right? The other thing that the bridge does is it will read attributes that we sprinkle into the markup and use that to inform native features, whether it's reading data or pulling URLs, things like that. So by using the bridge, our developers can apply these kind of attributes and expect these attributes from the app in a way and ship something without us having to touch it. They'll announce, hey, we shipped this feature, and they've made the view responsive, they've added in the right attributes, and it's just all hooked in. We don't have to worry about it. And so that's the portion where we evaluate and say, okay, do we want to do something with this that's an enhancement of the web view, or is it good enough? There's things like it's a settings screen that someone's going to use twice a year. We're not going to touch that. But if it's a high fidelity interaction like to-dos, we probably will. So I'll give you a couple examples of just how this looks. So on this slide, you can sort of see, Basecamp running Safari versus our Electron app. So just some minor style differences, position of things. We add navigation tools at the top there. And then here's running a mobile Safari versus the iOS app. Here there's a lot more happening. You can see we take away the web navigation by setting an attribute through the bridge and replace it with native navigation. Navigation is one of those things that works better on native and allows us to make the experience better, right? And I'll get into that more. So here's a kind of concrete example. So at the top of every page, we've got a little menu button, a little more options button, and this is sort of the mechanism we use to populate that menu. The menu is native. It's a native interaction. It should pop up instead of a pop up in a web view is kind of gross. And so you can see we've got this data bridge action type. And that just tells it that this is an edit action, and we're going to grab the URL from that element and navigate to it via this menu. We also have a scheme to set. We have a collection of these icons, so the web developer can identify which icon to use with that action, and optionally change the label if they wanted to call it edit something. Change the word edit to something else on native. And here's sort of the reverse. So here's something where on the HTML element, the bridge configuration is asserting this native share feature. And this is sort of a way for us to opt in to a feature on iOS that Android may not have implemented yet, or maybe implemented differently. And part of the reason we use this opt-in approach is so that we don't have to worry about which version of the Basecamp client someone's running. The client tells the web view what it needs and what it's capable of. And so in this case, it just triggers we hide some elements in the web view that we're going to replace with our own native content or interaction. We have another part of this called the manifest. And what this does is this applies some just general rules, basically based on URL pattern matching. But it tells our navigation controllers how to present these views. So we could set a background color so that the web view is transparent on top of that, so we get a nice smooth transition. We could change the presentation. We have the regular advanced navigation or display something in a modal. And so we use this file, which right now we're bundling in the app, but we will probably eventually move it to the server so it can also be updated independent of the app. And so there's just an example. There's an advanced navigation versus tapping a comment and it opens up in a modal. And so I have some examples here that I was going to go through and just show you how we actually do this and some of the features that we've decided that in this case, using native is worth our time and worth enhancing the feature. So this is sort of the home view in Basecamp. Each of these cards represents your projects and teams in your account. There's also some tools, your bookmarks and assignments and things like that. Just comparing on both platforms. In this case, the visual design is very much the same, but that is a fully native view in iOS. This is one of the 4 main tabs in Basecamp, and it's important that it load fast. People are visiting it all day long. It's worth investing the time and effort in mobile, in native. And one of the things we balance with that is, because we work asynchronously with these other teams, when we take on a mobile data view like this, we're incurring some debt, right? Now we have a maintenance cost. We have to say that, well, if the web team changes the design of the screen, we have to do the same thing. And that starts to increase that coordination tension, right? So we're pretty judicious about it. This is a screen where, again, it's high interaction. You can do force touch on these cards. There's live filtering. Again, it has to load fast. People use it all the time. And the design is fairly static and hasn't changed much. So it's sort of met all of our criteria for something that really should be native instead of relying on web. This is another case. In this case, we went with a completely different design. This one actually hasn't shipped yet, but it's very close. Looking at a single project in this case, this is our iOS team project, and the web design has these cards, which are each of the tools of Basecamp has a card, and each of them has sort of like a little content preview. Now, if you imagine, I didn't include a screenshot, but if you imagine shrinking those cards onto a phone screen and you have these little postage stamps with little tiny text inside each one of them, it's not very useful. So we made this native and came up with a completely different design that's a little bit more native looking and a little more direct. It also makes latest activity, which is sort of your feed of what's happened in this project, easier to access, like it's below the fold on the web view in this case. So this is an example of sort of what I touched on with Sam there, is that this is a design that started first on iOS. Basecamp has these notifications across the top. So there's pings, which is a direct message thing. Hey, which is our name for basically your inbox. Here's all your incoming notifications. And then we also used to have a separate one for campfires, which is our built-in group chat. We found on iOS, those were originally tabs, and you're constantly switching back and forth through these different kind of notification types. we decided as a team to try unifying them. So you have one tab and all of your notifications of all your different kinds are in one place. So on the iOS version, instead of pings being in a separate menu, it's this row of avatars across the top, which we laughingly called Basecamp stories at one point. Stories were a big thing. Don't hear it that much anymore, though. And so eventually, the pattern stuck, and the web team liked it enough that they shipped it as well. Funnily enough, is they shipped it kind of verbatim with the pings across the top and everything, and got some pretty serious feedback from users that wasn't going to work. So they actually went back a few days later and separated the pings out into a separate menu again. So it's a case where the forces are different, and they kind of just cargo culted our design because it worked really well on iOS. We all liked it. Everyone was happy with it. Customers loved it, and found really quickly that there are different expectations on web, and so they kind of backtracked from that. But it's nice for us sometimes to not always be building what the web does and sort of replicating their features, but coming up with things that are uniquely mobile and still kind of feed back to the main product. Here's another one that shipped first on iOS. So you can't see the first screen on this screenshot here, but basically in the nav bar there's a little affordance where you can tap the nav bar to jump somewhere else in that same project, jump to another tool. They eventually shipped this on desktop as well, in a completely different form, but you just kind of tap that grid icon and it slides down. So here's one more. Here's one where we came up with a more mobile native feeling design. So this is what we call latest activity. It's basically a stream of everything that happens on the account. And streams are basically the bread and butter of iPhone apps, right? So like every app has one. They all do it well. This is a very common interaction, and it should be native. It should scroll fast. It should be each of those cards should be interactive. So we invested the time here to make that stream native and make it look more like a native stream, like the patterns that people are used to on mobile. This probably won't feed back to the desktop. What they have there with this kind of staggered timeline is kind of unique and interesting. But it just didn't work on mobile whatsoever to have that space, a two-column feed like that. It just makes no sense. Another one here. So Basecamp has a rich text writing tool that we developed in-house called Tricks. It's open source if you have needs of something like that, and it's pretty good. And we used it on iOS, but in our case, we re-implemented the toolbar there so that we can attach it as a keyboard accessory and make it responsive. Eventually, we'll do some things with perhaps long presses on some of those tools, kind of scrolls horizontally. Another case where again, input and any kind of touching is better on native. So one last example here. This is the iPad version of Basecamp, and it's kind of interesting that basically the iPhone app fits into that sidebar there, and then we use the second panel to display content. And it's and again we have that native screen that works responsively, works on both layouts. So with that, that's what I have. We can go back through any of these if you want, but I've got some time to take questions. So if anyone has any thoughts, I'm game. Oh, go ahead. We do a lot. We try and do stuff as live as possible, which means a lot of times literally a sketch, just a drawing on paper, and to try and get the idea out as fast as possible. And that's sort of a core 37 signals thing. Like we're used to web development where we can iterate fast. And so we're not doing a lot of high fidelity, Photoshop or Sketch work at this point, unless it needs it. Maybe there's a point, so we may say, so let's see. For example, this project screen, I drew this sketch. I drew, circles. I said, hey, we're going to have these tools across here. We're going to have activity on the bottom, the header, and we just started implementing that. And then there was a point where, okay, now we need to refine it. That's when we do the high fidelity mock, and we'll start marking dimensions and colors and things for the developer. But we don't start there. And only in rare cases do we do things like prototyping, where we want to fine tune interaction and really show how a flow works from step to step, or we just can't visualize it and we need to step through it in a way that we can discuss.
So when you go from the kind of quick sketch phase to getting a developer to start building against it, do you guys have any sort of established design system or anything along those lines that they're already working in to basically plug in your sketches into existing components, or?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the product's 3 years old, so it's pretty mature at this point. So when we use this pattern, for example, of having a white icon in a colored circle all over the place. And so we have a custom view for that, and so they'll just reuse that, of course. I think this is the largest example, so this is the largest we've ever used them anywhere, but they'll just plug it in with what we have a lot of times. And as designers, we're kind of thinking the same way. We're pattern people, so we're like, okay, well, we did that here, we should be consistent and do this here, and usually that's enough. And our, both of our programmers are very much like iOS guys. Like they have taste for and I'm sure a lot of you have that. You use the platform every day. You have taste for size and color and how things appear. So we're kind of on the same page. It sounds like I'm sending a Photoshop file to someone who's super green and is coding in this app for the first time. Yeah.
So how would you handle a scenario where you're showing some drawing on a smaller screen in comparison versus an iOS and an Android phone, and you have to compromise on showing the UI because of the small screen? So how would you do that?
So you're asking, let's say there's a web view that we want to do very different things between iOS and Android with the same web view?
On a bigger screen versus showing that on a smaller screen, where you don't have the flexibility of showing all the UI. So you compromise to show only certain features of that particular screen. So how would you do that?
Typically, we'll do, so the design will be responsive for starts. The basic web view would be a responsive design, and we may do some of that at that point. The web developers may say, when we shrink this down to a certain size, these elements don't make sense, or these elements resize. And then iOS and Android can further decide what to do with those screens. So typically it's through the bridge. So we might set an attribute on the HTML that says, when iOS encounters this feature, we make these particular, style injections, or change this JS behavior, or apply a native behavior to it. And Android has the freedom to do the same thing. Does that make sense? Yeah.
How far out do you guys plan to go now?
6 weeks. And Jason's written a few posts on this if you're curious about the philosophy, but basically we sit down about every 6 weeks, look at what we've shipped, what's maybe in progress, and what we want to do next. We really don't have a lot of long-term planning for the product in general on any team. So we figure 6 weeks is about the sweet spot between, if you have too long, you fill the time, right? If you say you have 3 months to do something, it's going to take 3 months, right? And if you have, just 2 weeks, that's maybe not enough time to really ship anything significant. So 6 is where we've kind of settled, and we do that as a whole company. Every team works on that basic schedule.
How much does data play in your design decisions and how you get it? Like, do you A/B test, or do you just kind of go with your intuition as a designer as to what you think the customer wants?
We very rarely use A/B tests in the product. Usually we make a decision on a feature. We use it for marketing, we use it for upgrades, you know, things that move the needle like that. But when it comes to, you know, actual features in the app, we're not A/B testing those. We do have a data team that can answer questions for us about usage and you know, patterns and flows and things like that, which we will. Typically, we'll ask a question like, how many people do this? You know, or what percentage of people, you know, view this screen on a daily basis or a monthly basis? And we try and use those patterns to help us understand the problems. But actually, we don't use data a lot in our decision making. One thing that we've found is more useful is Ryan Singer, who's been with the company a long time, has really been focused on customer interviews lately in sort of this jobs to be done model. And so he's doing regular customer interviews where he's trying to understand in you know, half hour, 45-minute, hour conversations with individual customers. Why did you do this? Why do you use it this way? And trying to extract product ideas from that. And it's a very human way to do it. It's a very time-consuming way to do it, but we're getting really interesting results from that. And so you apply that with intuition. I mean, there are things that are just intuition, like we're just like, hey, this would be cool to have, and I think we would use it. And we are the biggest users of our own product. We use it every single day to build the product. So our intuition matters.
So when you guys pushed that feature from iOS and then rolled it into web and then quickly rolled it back,
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any specific like customer insight that you said, okay, we're going to trust the customer, not our intuition here, when they recoiled at that change? The messaging?
Yeah. There's a post on our Medium blog that where I think he explained some of this, so I may not describe it well, but yeah, there's a point where so when I say we're the biggest user of our app, we're like outlier level usage. So at some point we have to decide, oh, you know, most of our users are using it differently, and we have to listen to that feedback. And the outcry in this case was pretty vocal and very quick, and we even let it simmer for a few days. We're like, let's see if it settles down, and it was persistent, and people made compelling points. So
What are the channels that you use to get that feedback?
customer support, really. You know, of course, people will complain on Twitter. People will write our support team. You know, people will get their displeasure known. Yeah. But I think, you know, if we were a more rigorous team, we might have, you know, beta tested that more thoroughly. We may have, you know, interviewed customers about the specific features, but we're more fast and loose than that. And that's the good and bad of being a very small team. We can design something, ship it the same day, and then change our mind the same day too. That's a value for us. We like being able to do that, but I could see the appeal of a more methodical approach too. Anything else? So you can contact me. That's my handle on most things. You can email me. I suggest getting in touch with my team if you have technical questions, or you can ask me and I will forward it or get you an answer. But I hope this was helpful. I hope.
I do have another question.
Okay, sure.
I already had a hard stop at 1:30 here.
He's the boss.
Just talk just for a brief moment about your remote, the style of work that you guys do in the remote
Sure.
tools that you guys use for that.
Sure. So Basecamp is what we use for remote tools. But
The communication, sorry.
Yeah, no.
Video and like, are there anything else that you guys are bringing in that you're like, this is an interesting tool that we may look at in the future? Any like snippets you can give us of?
Sure. So, I mean, part of when I say, you know, we use Basecamp for ourselves, we use it to build a product, and we use it for the type of company we are. We have, like I said, 55 people. I think 13 or 14 live in Chicago, where our headquarters and our office is, and everybody else is somewhere else. And that's international, it's across the country, across time zones. And so our product is really made for that setup, and it works really well if you're in that similar setup. And so I spend, like you guys do with Slack probably, my team of 4, we spend all day in a campfire chat doing most of our communication. But each of the tools in Basecamp sort of has a different, what we call a gear. A message is sort of slow time. It's like email. You don't need an immediate response. It's a thoughtful post. It may be lengthy. You would never put that in chat. And then there are various tools that are sort of in between. The only thing we use outside of Basecamp is video conferencing. There are points where you can only discuss things so well via text. And sometimes it helps to see someone's face, to use real words, to talk in a group. You don't have that sort of weird ordering where we're talking about 3 different things at once in a chat. So we do escalate to that. It's sort of our last line. We're like, if we can figure this out without doing that, we would prefer to it. Because stopping everything, taking everyone's time, coordinating a time to talk, that's hard. That takes time in itself.
Do you, very, very tactical question, sorry.
Sure, no.
And also, because of how it's built and how the messages and chat works, do you then say, email notifications are off for your team? If you're a very outlier over here, are you using that for all that style communication? So email then does go way down and you focus solely on the tool, Basecamp, for that communication?
Yeah, we almost never send emails in the company. The only exception I can think of is some HR type things, but no, we put everything in Basecamp. It's Jason would say it's the way we run our business. It's more than just how we do work, but the business runs on Basecamp. It's an intranet, to use an old style word. Yeah. Anything else? Thank you all. I appreciate your attention.